Hello, this is Vox Africa News from our London studios. I am Pamela Bonkyung. Let's have a peek at today's major headlines. Renewed rivalries among the Orma and Pokomo tribes in southeast Kenya lead to scores dead. The US Army hands over control of the Bagram prison to Afghan security forces. Do we see the beginning of an end to a mission? And whoever thought an iPhone could be the subject of an art exhibition? Well, a South African photographer has shown iPhone images differently, but is it welcome? Raiders have killed over 30 people and injured many in clashes over land and access to water in Kenya. Natalie Muzunga reports.
Armed raiders killed 39 villagers and set fire to houses in Kenya's coastal region in a revenge attack that is part of a long-running dispute over grazing land and water. The attackers targeted a village in the Tana Delta inhabited by Pokomo farmers late on Thursday. Less than 3 weeks after, 100 Pokomo tribesmen armed with spears and machetes killed more than 50 people in an attack on an Orma settlement. The violence follows deadly riots in Kenya's main port of Mombasa after the assassination of a radical Muslim cleric. Although unrelated, the two events have exposed a deep social, political and sectarian divides that could lead to more violence ahead of a presidential election next year.
They were over between 300, let us say 400. All of them were heavily armed with guns, not arrows or machetes. They just attacked our village and started shooting indiscriminately. They exchanged fire with a few police reservists who are stationed here, overpowered them and surrounded the entire village.
Efforts by top government officials, among them the Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who visited the area after the previous attack, have so far failed to defuse the tensions. The region's district commissioner, David Kiprop, confirmed the attack at its early stages prior to the escalated death toll.
Following the attacks, or in the wake of those attacks, 11 deaths were reported, but I think the number has since shot up by 1 to 12.
Cattle rustling and clashes over grazing and farming land are relatively common between communities in arid areas of East Africa and often escalate into revenge attacks. Such attacks have become increasingly violent in recent years because of a steady influx of weapons across Kenya's porous borders, in particular from a war-ravaged Somalia.
Meanwhile, church leaders in the Democratic Republic of Congo are calling on the international community to help stop the atrocities in the country's eastern region. Rwanda has been accused of backing armed groups for economic gain and, in the process, killing hundreds of civilians. During a conference last Wednesday at the United Nations headquarters, the horrors suffered by some of the victims were described. The 17,000-member UN peacekeeping force, otherwise known as MONUSCO, in the region has been forced to divert most of its resources to stop fallout from fighting between the Congolese army and M23 rebels. Kigali has repeatedly rejected allegations that it is arming M23 rebels. Last week, Rwanda withdrew over 300 soldiers from eastern DR Congo who had been fighting alongside Congolese troops. The army spokesperson said the situation on the ground rendered their continued presence impossible. Here is Diodone Mbaya Chiakane, the moderator of the National Church of Christ in DR Congo.
Rwanda is not only behind M23 movement, but Rwanda is named to be behind all these different rebel or militia groups in DRC. Why that? You can see that Rwanda has become producer of coltan, of diamond, and so on. This is on internet and in all the sources. And none of these minerals are not in Rwanda. So it is an economic game behind the rebels and all these movements to get as you know, these wealth from DRC.
The President of Ghana, John Mahama, has been on a state visit to Benin. During this visit, bilateral cooperation in the sectors of energy, maritime and other activities against piracy were renewed. The Ghanaian president gave his assurance to Beninese President Yaya Boni that although Ghana was facing some challenges in its energy sector, the completion of Bui hydroelectric project and the establishment of another plant in Takoradi would enable Ghana to become self-sufficient and also to export to her neighbors. The Malian crisis was raised and both states pledged to support the African Union and the Economic Community for West African States, ECOWAS, to restore peace and security to militarily challenged Mali. Here is Ghanaian President John Mahama.
One of the first steps towards resolving the Malian problem is to resolve the issue of power and constitutionality in Mali. That's one of the first steps. And that is part of the confusion we have from Mali as to who really, is in charge. We recognize the president because the constitution, indicates that he rightfully should be in the leadership, but then you can only intervene, when you are sure of what the constitutional situation in Mali is.
Sudan Stock Exchange is expecting a surge in trading volumes this year. This is down to the introduction of new computer-based trading systems, which will replace handwritten orders. Major challenges such as attracting more investment and overcoming severe economic crisis remain. Traders say the system is yet to be connected to the banks, brokers and the central bank. In a bid to raise more funds, Sudan's government and state firms have increased annual bond returns to 22% from 14 years ago. The Sudan's pound's decline has provided some lenders with windfall foreign exchange gains, according to bankers. And now it's off to Tunisia, where a Tunisian artist is crying freedom using calligraffiti to fight religious extremism and bring in a message of hope and unity. The graffiti is spread across buildings in Tunisia, a country getting back to life after a revolution. Tension came to the fore between artists and religious sectors when thousands of Salafi Islamists were angered by an art exhibition they said was insulting. Artists are now reclaiming their artistic freedom by writing poetic messages. Conflict and violence as a reason over artwork and have fueled fears among Tunisians they may slide into instability. Though Islamists did not play a huge role in the revolution, the controversy following the role of Islam in the post-revolution Tunisia in government and society has brought much division within Tunisian politics. Let's move from politics and art to Tunisia developments in its economy. Fuel subsidies will be cut, leading to a hike in petrol prices. Consumers say this move will cause the prices of other essential goods to go up. The price of petrol will be raised to 7.2% by the government in a bid to plug the country's deficit. The country's government sets the price of domestic fuel products in part through a subsidy. This year, it will be capped at 1.3 billion dinars compared to last year's 1.5 billion dinars. Many consumers on the street feel this decision will have far-reaching effects on the society. Though Tunisia is gradually recovering from last year's uprisings, it faces problems as a result of the Eurozone crisis, its main market for exports and the source of most of its tourist visitors. And then it's off to nearby Egypt, where Egypt's constitutional assembly could soon be in turmoil if there is no turnaround on allowing Islamic scholars to have a say in Egypt's legislation. Many liberals in anger have abandoned the constitutional assembly and challenged it in court, saying Islamists have too much control and could turn Egypt into an Iran-style theocracy. Proposals by ultra-conservative Salafi Islamists could give Al-Azhar powers and defining the principle of Islamic law. Al-Azhar is a university and clerical body that has been a center for Sunni scholarship since the Middle Ages. Arguments over Azhar's decision on whether legislation complies with Islamic Sharia law has diverted much attention from necessary issues such as the balance of power between the president and parliament and the influence of the army, among others. Migrant in the rare show of solidarity, Israel has opened up its borders to 3 African migrants on Thursday. The migrants had camped on its desert border with Egypt for almost a week. Israeli media groups said the group made up of 20 migrants were Eritrean. In order to reduce the influx of illegal migrants, Israel is building a fence along its 260 kilometers long frontier with the Egyptian Sinai, which will be completed by the end of this year. Meanwhile, humanitarian organizations in Israel have pressed that the migrants be considered for asylum. Some Israelis have expressed worry that a country founded by war refugees and immigrants should be packing off foreigners en masse. The Israeli army insists the area is a closed military zone. Let's hear more from Dr. Arid, head of emergency department in Joseph Tau Hospital in Eilat.
We want simply to execute a very basic human mission, to examine patients that are in potential need, probably in severe conditions. After 8 days that are stuck between fences, I believe the issue of dehydration, starvation, comorbidities, not mentioning everything that they passed through the way, along the way to the border, and I think they should get some medical attention.
Fugitive Iraqi President Tariq al-Hashemi has denounced his death sentence as being politically motivated and issued by a kangaroo court. Hashemi said he would not return to Iraq in 30 days as demanded. Following his sentence, a spate of bomb attacks took place in the mainly Shiite Baghdad district yesterday. This is threatening to stoke sectarian instability for a senior Sunni politician to be threatened by a Shiite government still battling political instability. Since American troops left the country last December, Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's Shiite-led government has been deadlocked among the Shiite, Sunni and Kurdish blocs. Let's hear more from fugitive Iraqi Vice President Tariq al-Hashemi.
Yesterday, Prime Minister al-Maliki and his politicized judiciary concluded the final phase of their theatrical campaign against me using a kangaroo court set up for this purpose. It was really a shamble. Therefore, while reconfirming my and my guards' absolute innocence, I totally reject and will never recognize the unfair, the unjust, the politically motivated verdict. I invoke and even I beg all Iraqis, especially my supporters, to exercise a high discipline of a high standard of self-discipline. We should try our best to avoid slip into a fresh sectarian strife. Al-Maliki pushing towards very aggressively.
The United States earlier today handed over control of the largest US-run prison in Afghanistan to the Afghan government in what was a very formal ceremony. Following months of disagreements on how the transfer should be handled, an agreement was arrived at in March for the Bagram prison to be passed into Afghan control. However, the United States holds a veto in deciding which prisoners should be released. The prison holds many suspected Taliban fighters. Afghanistan had wanted control over the prison on the grounds that in the past, no country has allowed thousands of its people to be held indefinitely on the foreign guard. We hear more from Colonel Robert Tavadash, commander of task forces at the Bagram Air Base.
We transferred more than 3,000 Afghan detainees into your custody at an expedient rate and ensured that those who would threaten the partnership of Afghanistan and coalition forces would not return to the battlefield. I would like to personally thank and recognize the efforts of the Afghan National Army soldiers and their leaders for quick manning of the housing units, receiving the transferred detainees, and taking over the kitchen facility.
Police have sealed up.
We transferred more than 3,000 Afghan detainees into your custody at an expedient rate and ensured that those who would threaten the partnership of Afghanistan and coalition forces would not return to the battlefield. I would like to personally thank and recognize the efforts of the Afghan National Army soldiers and their leaders for quick manning of the housing units, receiving the transferred detainees, and taking over the kitchen facility.
Police have sealed off the road in the leafy village of Claregate in southwest of London and evacuated the area surrounding the £1 million home of the French Alps shooting victims. The Al-Hilis, a bomb disposal unit, was at their home today because of concerns about items found on the property. The property was searched by police over the weekend for clues to what may have triggered last Wednesday's shooting, which left Iraqi-born British businessman Saeed Al-Hili, his wife and mother-in-law dead. Both daughters survived the attack, and the French police are waiting to question 7-year-old Zainab Al-Hili, who regained consciousness. She suffered beatings and was shot during the attack. Her 4-year-old sister Zina has been returned to Britain. Let's get some fairy tales. In all of this, Ukraine has staged a living art exhibition of Sleeping Beauty. It featured a woman asleep on a couch who pledges to marry a stranger who awakens her with a kiss. However, the story ends in a twist as the woman awakens to a kiss from another woman. As part of the exhibit, the participating women and visitors had to sign a contract agreeing to marry whoever awoke Beauty with a kiss. Neither woman, according to media reports, is a lesbian. Taras Polataiko, who brought up the idea for the exhibition, was just as surprised by the outcome. Let's hear more from Taras Polataiko, Sleeping Beauty exhibit artist.
Honestly, I wasn't hoping, because it's a serious thing. I wasn't really hoping. I thought well, who knows what the girls' motivations are. But when it actually happens, it just takes it to all of a sudden to the huge next level. So I'm still in the moment. I haven't had a chance to reflect on it. But what happened is awfully beautiful. I think what's going to happen is going to create the collision, in terms of law, legal collision. What happened contradicts the Ukrainian law. So I hope it will generate the discussion about the gender relationships in this society, and hopefully it'll influence it in a progressive way. In terms of what the girls will decide to do, it's up to them. My role as an artist is finished here.
Following a Greek meeting with Troika inspectors, Greek Finance Minister Yannis Stounaras said it was a difficult talk. Troika inspectors from the European Commission, the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund met earlier today and tried to bridge differences with the country's lenders over the austerity package. The Greek Finance Minister said they tried to convince the Troika inspectors that the Greek plan, which did not have layoffs but transfers and early retirement, was the right choice. The Troika team maintained the plans were very vague at best, according to an insider. The Troika have to approve cuts if Athens is to get a green light for the next installment of bailout loan money. It needs to avoid bankruptcy. More on the economic front, where our figures have been released today on Chinese trade data, indicating its trade has weakened and highlights an economic slowdown which has deepened. This comes ahead of the upcoming leadership transition, according to analysts. Imports fell 2.6% in August against expectations that it would rise to 3.5%. Exports, however, grew 2.7%, very well below forecast of 3% rise following a Reuters poll. And spite of all this, China's trade with the United States and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, rapidly increased in the first 8 months of the year, according to statistics of Chinese customs released today as well. Trade with the European Union and Japan saw a decrease. How about we get more inside information from Xiao Geng, Head of Research at the Fung Global Institute, a think tank which generates business-relevant research with Asian perspectives.
My reaction is that this is very bad. This is so bad that you actually see both internal and external pressures, and also indicates that there are no immediate solutions, because the Chinese authority already started to relax the monetary policy, fiscal policy a few months ago, and obviously there's no results. There's no effectiveness. So this is really bad, and some new ways to deal with the situation has to come out very soon.
Now there's more good news on the business front, as Australia's struggling Qantas Airways has agreed to a 10-year alliance with Dubai's Emirates in what one can dub a historic meeting. This will help Qantas to shore up its loss-making international business. From March 2013, Qantas will replace Singapore with Dubai for its hub for European flights. They would coordinate the pricing, sales and schedules with Emirates under the partnership unveiled last Thursday, the 6th of September. The Australian airline will also end its existing relationship with British Airways at the same time as a result of the new alliance. For customers, benefits include the pair-sharing airport lounges and frequent flyer programs. The Australian airline had been reducing costs out of its business after a year troubled by record full bill, rising competition and a labour union that has opposed the carriers' spending cuts. We hear more from Qantas CEO Joyce and Emirates CEO Tim Clark and the editor for Australia's Business Traveller, David Flynn.
This restructure will significantly result in a massive improvement of the economics of our Asian services. A key objective is to make Qantas International strong and viable and bring it back to profitability. This partnership will help us do just that, while building on our strengths in Qantas Domestic, Qantas Frequent Flyer and in Jetstar.
The international airline community needs to align itself to what is going on in the 21st century, not what's going on at the back end of the 20th century, because so much has changed. So will a consolidated industry be in front of us in the next 3 to 5 years? Probably. Will the alliance structures as they exist today remain as they are? I'm not altogether sure about that. I think this arrangement today suggests that with the power and the strength of this, that this is the beginnings of perhaps a new thinking as to how we should be organising and understanding traffic flows across the planet and how they've changed over the last 15 or 20 years.
This is a historic hookup for Qantas and Emirates. It radically redraws the network map to put Dubai at the centre of Qantas's global network. It also could prove a pivot point to get Qantas back in the black even quicker than Alan Joyce expected.
There is nothing more potent than telling a story with images. That is what South African innovative photographer Dale Yudelman has achieved, using just his iPhone to take photos, which tell the story of the country's racial segregated South Africa to today's democratic South Africa. The pictures were exhibited at the Wheat Art Museum in Johannesburg last Tuesday and will move to Cape Town in the coming months. The pictures taken over an 18-month period have put together under an exhibition and a book titled Live Under Democracy. Some critics said that not enough had changed since apartheid. Yudelman, who has been a photographer for over 3 decades, started out as a teenager working for a daily paper then around the world. His exhibition is one of its kind in South Africa, as it was shot only on the iPhone. How about we hear more from Dale Yudelman himself, the photographer, and Kolisi Thomas, a Johannesburg resident.
I've tried to keep myself open to how I see democracy. I can't speak for everybody, and I've tried to keep things fair to myself and how I experience it when I wake up every day.
Change the title to Life Under Apartheid. A lot of the images would still reflect the same circumstances that a lot of the people in the photography still live. And he's chosen to take pictures of workers, security guards, maids, people who work in, fish and chip shops or at a roadhouse. And I think it talks to the circumstance of the majority of people living in South Africa today, workers, a lot of them poor, a lot of them unemployed, and he's captured a lot of that in his images as well.
We have a look once again at today's major headlines. Renewed rivalries among the Oran Pokoma tribes in southeast Kenya lead to scores dead. The US Army hands over control of the Bakram prison to Afghan security forces. Do we see the beginning of an end to a mission? And whoever thought an iPhone could be the subject of an art exhibition? Well, a South African photographer has shown iPhone images differently, but is it welcome? Thank you for watching, and for more updates, please do visit our website at www.voxafrica.co.uk/news. Goodbye.